Welcome to Edgetalkers. I'm your host, Todd Lejnieks.
Taoist, Buddhist, Muslim, Jew, Christian, Hindu, chosen few, temple burning, atheism, burning man, paganism.
Those are just a few of the topics we will be discussing and the people we will be hearing from on Edgetalkers.
Dogs and rats, childbearing, those without, single, married, gangs and scouts.
Thank you to Matt Venuti for graciously letting us use his song, The Rhythm of Life, for our intro and outro. You can download this song and check out the rest of his songs and albums at mattvenuti.com. That's MATTVENUTI. And indeed, in this rhythm of life, we are all in this together.
We're all in this, the rhythm of life. Rhythm of life. The rhythm of life.
Edgetalkers is about taking conversations to the edge with anyone. Bible thumpers, hardcore trumpers, atheists, deists, and those in between us. Conversations at the edge of reason, the edge of comfort, the edge of purpose, the edge of reality. No subject is too out there or too fringy to discuss, but we will be concentrating on questions like, is our present way of life sustainable? And if so, for how long? Is Mother Earth a living being? How do you talk to Uncle Bob about global warming when he's wearing his MAGA cap to Thanksgiving dinner? And underlying all of our questions, as Charles Eisenstein puts it, what's it like to be you?
All in this together. We're all in this together. All in this together.
Today we feature conversations with 5 of us who call ourselves the Pachacasters. We are a group of podcasters who also are involved with Pachamama Alliance. Linda Lombardo has graciously agreed to co-host this episode. Linda has her own podcast at voiceofevolutionradio.com. We will be talking first to the irrepressible Sue Blythe about the goings-on in Florida and some beautiful projects that she's been creating involving elders and children, local community, and global outreach. And then we'll be having a very deep conversation with Susan Livingston. We both recently read the book Climate: A New Story by Charles Eisenstein, and that opened up a conversation about the whole environmental story going on right now. Then Linda and Becky Suzik have a joy-fueled discussion. I hope you enjoy our first episode of Edgetalkers. Really, really happy to have you joining me, Linda, because I need my handheld here, I think, a bit. So,
it's
you
nice
and I,
to be here.
yeah, thank you. You're a podcaster also. You and I met through the Pachamama Alliance. Felt a kinship with you already, even before I knew you were a podcaster, just based on what communications we had had. And I'd like to have you introduce yourself, talk about your own podcast, and also how you got involved with Pachamama Alliance, and what's the appeal of podcasting to you?
So I'm Linda Lombardo. I am a life coach. I'm a certified forest therapy guide, and I'm also a podcaster. The podcasting happened somewhere in the middle of all of that, and I'll address that primarily since that's why we're here. I took a leadership program in 2011, 2012 with the Coaches Training Institute. It was their leadership program designed to come out with a quest, with your, how am I going to show up in the world, all defined for you. And I was so taken by my colleagues, by my tribe members, and their passionate purpose in the world. All of them had something unique that they wanted to bring to the world, that I felt their voices needed to be heard. The short story is I ended up on my own. I changed the name to Voice of Evolution Radio and decided that there was really a much bigger topic here that needed to be examined. So the purpose is conversations that awaken, inspire, and activate. And in the course of that time, I developed a radio drama series called In the Soul's Waiting Room, which is about why the world is the way it is, at least from the perspective of these two imaginary characters, one being the keeper of soul's purpose, who decides it's time to talk to humanity, or at least share some perspectives with humanity. And that's all I'll say about that for now, because it does get more complex. And if I get into that, we'll never stop.
Okay. Yeah. And I listened to your podcast and found it very compelling. The voices you have different people involved and different voices, even from different people. And it's really a well put together. I'd say it's more of a production even than a podcast, but really enjoyed it. And I think you have very powerful things to say. And I'll look forward to interviewing you as well on my podcast.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. And
Pachamama Alliance, I guess, is the next place to go, right? And
yeah.
Well, that happened a long time ago. I can't even remember. I know Lynn Twist's book, The Soul of Money. She spoke at a Bigger Game Expo, and Rick Tamlin's Play Your Bigger Game is a big part of my leadership journey to where I am today. I talk about that on Voice of Evolution Radio too. And there was just something so compelling about the original story of how the Pachamama Alliance came about, the dreams, the messages from the Ashwar people. And that just sucked me right into the story. And I'm, my game changer, a small group moderator. I am an Awakening the Dreamer facilitator. I've done a couple of the Project Drawdown programs via Zoom, which was the first time it had been done that way, because I didn't feel I had the audience locally, but I knew globally I probably could attract a really nice and varied audience. And so I continue to see their work in the world as this soul's journey, this passionate purpose that they have, the thing that they cannot not do, that the thing that they must do in the world. And I'm very all about that.
You and I have a similar path, I think, as far as our introduction to Pachamama and our continued participation in it. I also was involved with Lynn's Soul of Money before I even ever heard about Pachamama. My partner, Rochelle, and I took the Soul of Money course with her and got a ton out of it. And, during the course, she mentioned Pachamama Alliance. I said, oh, that's interesting. I'll check that out. And yes, same thing, Linda. When I heard the story of how Lynn went to the rainforest and started having visions and was really just called there by the indigenous people, it just blew me away. And I said, I got to learn more about this stuff. So long story short, I'm also an Awakening the Dreamer facilitator. We actually have our second Awakening the Dreamer here in the Singapore, Malaysia area, which I'll be facilitating on Sunday. And I have moderated 4 Game Changer intensives now, and just love doing that. I love the course, but I also just love hanging out with the people that take the course. It's just really a great experience that I have doing that. Today we have a special guest. We have another Pachamama podcaster in our group. We call informally the Pachacasters. We have Sue Blythe with us, and Sue is in something called the Drawdown Challenge, which I'm interested to hear about, and also in the Elders of Southwest Florida. And then she's involved with something called Future Flash. And we've been talking for some time about putting together a podcast about all of us Pachamama podcasters. And here we are. And I'd like to hear about you, Sue Blythe, and what your background with Pachamama Alliance is, what interests you in podcasting, and what is going on with you and the elders down in Florida.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be with you both. And I came into the Pachamama community in Florida through an interfaith group. It was the Florida Interfaith Climate Actions Network. And when I went to their first, actually it was their second assembly, it was my first one in Orlando, I learned about the Pachamama Alliance programs and invited some of the people there to come to Gainesville, Florida, where I was. And I too just had that, oh, it was just like a magical draw. And here I've found kindred spirits, and I have just loved being with the Pacha people all this time. So what has happened is the other place where I felt that huge draw was to the Earth Charter. There's a quote in the Earth Charter that says, to uphold the right of all without discrimination to a natural and social environment supportive of human dignity, bodily health, and spiritual well-being, with special attention to the rights of indigenous peoples and minorities. And so I had never, I certainly had a lot of experience with relating to all of those aspects with minorities, but I didn't know any indigenous people. And so to find this community of people right here in my state that were focused on the indigenous story coming out of the Amazon region, and that connected me to indigenous people here in Florida. And so now we've got this growing network of people throughout the state who are working together on larger pictures and common problems. So I feel like the story that I have to tell is through the eyes of a little girl named Pacha. And she is a character in a book that was published by Balance Edutainment, and they're out of California. Pacha comes from the Pachamama Alliance and the Pachamama story. They're not related, but they know about each other, but I am kind of a connector to bring those together. So for several years now, I've been writing this story that is Pacha. It's like a sequel to the book that is already published. His book is called Pacha's Pajamas, a story written by nature. And it's just a real imaginative explanation of how a little girl goes into kind of a dream world where she is part of nature and helps to plan a nature festival. And what they end up with is a biome stages all the way around. So you've got all the different biomes of the planet and a way to solve problems in each of those. And there's a main stage where people come and celebrate nature. And so I wrote a story where we can all play. And the thrill for me is having it come to life. We just the other night did our first podcast, the Welcome to We show. And so we are using my whole basis for all of this is the Earth Charter. And maybe I should tell about what the Earth Charter is.
Yeah, that'd be great.
It came out of, in 1992, there was the Earth Summit of the United Nations in Rio de Janeiro. And there was an effort to put together an Earth Charter that everybody could agree is the way we want to take care of people and planet. And of course, it's a huge task and it didn't get done in time for that conference. But it did inspire individuals to put together a global consultation that lasted almost a decade and went into the Earth Charter that was launched at the Peace Palace in The Hague in the year 2000. And so I heard about it in, I think, 1998 and got involved in it. And it's just like my blueprint for how we need to be living. So ever since then, I've been working in many different educational settings to do little activities introducing the Earth Charter to people in different ways. And so what I've done is put all of this together in this story that is the sequel to Pacha's Pajamas, where at the end of their first story, nature decides we really do need the humans to help solve all these problems. And so my job in the sequel, which is called Future Flash 2020, Pacha and Game, we're playing a game. And in fact, we're playing the Sustainable World Games, and we're going to do it on Pacha's main stage. And we are having this Welcome to We show is the way we organize it. And so right now, what I'm doing to make it real in Florida is working with the Pachamama Drawdown elders in Southwest Florida. And we are putting out the Drawdown Challenge and saying, look, it is possible that we can pull that CO2 down, put it back in the ground, and save the world for future generations of life on Earth. And so let's do that. And we're making it a children's game that requires the youth, elders, and youth, adults, and elders each to play their role in things that they are already doing. One of Pacha's songs is Use What You Got. And so we're going to identify what we got in each community that can help us to have this sustainable, just, and peaceful future.
Where can one find your book? And also, how does one find your podcast that you just finished?
The book, Pacha's Pajamas, is at pachacasters.com. And as you go there, you'll see that it's not just a written print book. It is also an app that lights up from each of the pictures in the children's book. You shine the app on it, and up pops an animated video and songs and all kinds of fun things.
Wow. You know what I really love, Sue, sorry for interrupting, is just how fun you're making all of this. You know, a lot of times I hear the climate activists and they're quoting gigatons of carbon and we only have 3 years left and we're already in climate destruction. And you're just having fun, it seems like, with this whole thing. It's so great.
I feel like, you know, we love life. Yes. I have grandchildren. I have 8 grandchildren. I wrote this when I started this story when my youngest was still my oldest grandson was still 1 year old. And it's been evolving all these years. He's now 12. So I wanted to make it fun for my grandchildren.
I remember from Drawdown, Paul Hawkins saying, you know, are you going to be a victim? You're creating opportunity for young people rather than handing them the burden of what has been created. You know, and saying, here you go, let's just dump it in your lap because you've got to fix this. You're really handing them the opportunity. And I can't imagine any child not wanting to rise to that occasion.
I'd like to just end with the quote at the end of the Earth Charter. The Earth Charter ends with this statement, which is really the underlying motivation for the Future Flash Climate Challenge. Priority 1 of the Sustainable World Games. Let ours be a time remembered for the awakening of a new reverence for life, the firm resolve to achieve sustainability, the quickening of the struggle for justice and peace, and the joyful celebration of life. That's what we're after, is that joyful celebration of life.
That's wonderful.
Well, thank you so much for bringing your joy and your smile and your laughter and your beautiful intention of working with children for their future, along with the elders. To me, that's like one of the most necessary things that we can do as a culture, is just bring our elders and our children together. And you are boots on the ground doing it there in Florida, and I really appreciate the work that you're doing.
Thank you for letting us be part of what you are doing.
Village people, city dwellers, country folk, gals and fellas, gay, bi, straight, tolerate, love and hate, clueless, genius, black, yellow, white, brown, red, stars, Mars, Venus, gas, pure, tainted, living, dead.
Our next guest is Susan Livingston. Susan's work can be found at panina.org. That's PANINA.org. And also her podcast, Sequitur. We start the conversation acknowledging Susan's great work bringing the pachacasters together. You have been extraordinarily, wonderfully productive when it comes to putting together the schedule for these podcasts and your ideas and just specific content ideas. And I just want to start off by saying how much I really appreciate the work that you've put in to bringing this all together. And I really thank you.
Well, I thank you, Todd, for that recognition. It's wonderful to be seen for one's efforts. And what you just said, my heart was just swelling as you were speaking. I'm very passionate about this work.
Just to echo Todd, you've been very instrumental in getting us all here. Todd has, Edgetalkers now, which I really love, because even just listening to Sue Blythe speak, there are so many people around the edge of all the issues that are going on right now. That I had this visual image of that we don't know about. Mm. And it was fascinating hearing her speak, and I'm going to love to hear what you have to say as well. The idea that there are these edge talkers, and while it's edgy at the same time, they're also on the fringe of something that perhaps we don't know about, and the world does need to know about. We're not all the big names. And this is in part why I created my program. I said there are people doing work in the world that's so valuable, and we need to know about it. It's not just those big names, the famous or the infamous. There are those of us doing incredibly compassionate, sustainable work in the world, and our voices do need to be heard.
I just want to congratulate you, Todd, on the name Edgetalkers. I think that's absolutely fantastic.
Awesome.
I've been pushing edges for years, and talking about it on my podcast. So, I was asking myself in preparation for this morning, I was asking myself, what exactly am I trying to accomplish with the Sequitur podcast? And what it really boils down to, it is very selfish and has nothing to do with saving the world. It's all about authentic self-expression. And I'm a great follower of Charles Eisenstein, and he talks about how, the big names aren't doing anything that's more important than what I'm doing in trying to bring truth to the settlement of my father's estate 4 years after he died. There's none of it, just because you can't monetize what I'm doing or measure it in terms of carbon output or anything like that, doesn't make it any less valuable. And I really, really, really want to rest in the knowledge that there's a need for everyone's authentic self-expression and for everyone's right action, whatever that means to the individual.
That's beautiful. I love that so much. And as you know, I call myself a fanboy of Charles Eisenstein. I just really love him and what he says. And I that is also one of the things that I love, is that he's not really putting in numbers or calculating who's producing more results or any of that. The person taking care of their father is just as important as the person on stage in front of 20,000 people talking about civil rights. There's just no difference there, really. So I want to ask you a few questions. What brought you initially to Pachamama Alliance?
I think I heard Lynn Twist as a guest of the Shift Network way back when the Maestro conference system was first coming online. I was one of the beta testers for that system. And so I got hooked up a lot of these edgy people way back then, around the beginning of this decade. And so I was following the Shift Network, and therefore Lynn, and the formation of the Pachamama Alliance. And I think, as a matter of fact, Barbara Marx Hubbard was even promoting the Pachamama Alliance back then in the early days of Shift Network, when she wasn't as monetized as she later became. And then I was living out on the West Coast. I lived in Berkeley, California from 2009 to 2014. And it was during that time that I went to Awakening the Dreamer, Changing the Dream. And it absolutely changed my life. I mean, it was just a fantastic experience. And I wrote my little pledge card. You know, you write this pledge card about the mission of Pachamama, but I couldn't resist adding to the end of that, even though I believe it is too late. I'm really into that right action thing. And I really feel like that's where my doubts about drawdown come in, by the way, is this whole bargaining attitude. Like, if we do this, then this is going to happen. You know, it's, again, that whole results thing that Charles talks about. So it was Awakening the Dreamer that really drew me to the Pachamama Alliance in the first place. And I started following it online. I went and visited their then new headquarters at the Presidio in San Francisco before I went back east, and met Tracy Apple and, you know, a bunch of the other staff. She's the one I remember the most for some reason. She really impressed me, struck me. Very earthy and connected and, I don't know, well-grounded person. I really like Tracy a lot. I moved back east and I signed up for the Game Changer Intensive while I was living in an illegal boarding house in Charlotte, North Carolina. But I signed on for Charles's Space Between Stories webinar anyway, and I signed up for the Game Changer Intensive anyway, and did all that online. I would go to the library and with my headphones and listen to the presentation off the internet, and then go home and write my little essay and bring it back to the library and load it onto the. It was a nightmare. I did not have internet at home, and I did all this online coursework anyway. And it was then that I started to sort of distance myself from Pachamama, because they wanted me to be a game changer moderator. And by the time we reached the end of the course, it was like I really enjoyed the course and the interaction with my classmates and that. But then when I found out that what we were supposed to be doing to so-called change the game had to do with legislative process, I said, no, this is not why I came to the Pachamama. I came to the Pachamama Alliance because I was moved by the plight of the indigenous people of the Amazon headwaters. And I thought that's what I wanted to get. And then it occurred to me, again, through my Story of Stuff correspondence with Annie Leonard, we don't want to change the game. We want to stop playing games entirely and get serious about this stuff. And so I said, no, I'm not going to be a game changer moderator. And so, you know, I went off and I did my thing. I followed Pachamama Alliance anyway, because I am still very connected with the indigenous people of Hart Island. As you probably heard if you listened to Sequitur Perception with John Perkins, co-founder of the Pachamama Alliance, I am still very connected with that whole thing. And I had my own shamanic awakening in summer of 2012 and have pursued studies, not so much with John Perkins, but with Don Oscar Miro Quesada and Star Wolf. Don Oscar is Peruvian. Star Wolf is more in the Seneca tradition in southeastern Canada. I'm really hot on doing that work. When I say that work, I'm talking about protecting the stewardship of the indigenous people of the Amazon headwaters. I don't want to import Western, you know, that Pachamama got in there and made them all take land titles. And now there's all this infighting about where the borders are and stuff. There never was that before they had land titles. They managed to work out their difficulties just fine without Western ways. And it hurts me. To me, you know, there's this thing they talk about cultural appropriation. I'm talking cultural imperialism. I don't want to impose Western ways on those people. I want to protect them from as much contact with the West as possible. You know, barefoot indigenous people practicing their folk ways and carrying cell phones. That makes no sense to me.
Yeah, I hear you for loud and clear. I did listen to your interview with John Perkins and was enthralled. I think it lasted probably about an hour, right? But it went by very quickly. And I really appreciate the way you challenged him, but also listened to him. You know, you just have such a great integrity about you, Susan, that you're basically just not going to put up with the BS when it comes to anything, and you're going to speak your mind. And that's what I like about your podcast, at least the one I listen to, is, you know, here's a guy, John Perkins, who I honestly would be nervous as hell to interview, because this guy's like, he's done A to Z he's gone from corporate finance to becoming a shaman to doing, medicine in the Amazon rainforest. I'd just be probably just sitting there, agog. But you had real challenging ideas to present to him. And I think he really loved that. I really do. I think that's what makes your podcast and your personality so great. And this is probably a good bridge to ask you about a little bit more about your podcast and what are you trying to do with it, and where is it at right now, and kind of where is it going?
As I said, I got into it as a result of working with Extinction Radio. I was their extreme weather reporter, and then Extinction Radio tanked, and I thought extreme weather was too important to just let it go. So I started posting a weekly extreme weather report, and I called it a podcast. It wasn't until I discovered Zoom that I really got into interviewing in a big way. I had tried to do some interviewing on Skype. It's just not as good because there's no on-site recording capacity whatsoever. So you have to make live recordings in your speaking space, and it just doesn't come out very good at all. It's an editing nightmare. So when I discovered Zoom, I got into interviewing in a much bigger way. And as I said, my main purpose has to do with authentic self-expression, because there are things I have experienced and insights that I've gained that need to be shared, that I think need to be shared. I'm an edge talker before there was even ever such a thing, okay? And so that's why that was the direction I took, was about authentic self-expression and inviting people that I think have important information to share. So, my shamanic mentors are on the podcast too. What you do is you click on the title if you're curious about it, and it'll bring you to the webpage for that podcast. And each podcast has a little teaser that tells you who the guest is and what they're going to be talking about, and stuff like that. Yeah. And you can decide if you want to commit an hour or to listen to it.
Cool. Where does one find your podcast? On what website?
Panina.org. That's PANINA. Peace and Nonviolence in Action. It's a .org website. We don't monetize our work at all. We do for love.
I would love to invite you for a longer, deeper conversation, because just in what you've said so far in these last few minutes, I'm just bubbling with ideas to talk to you about. One of them being Charles Eisenstein versus drawdown, which is probably a horrible way to frame it, but that's what my mind is doing to it right now. And, things like that, because I think a lot of these things look like they're opposed to each other, but they're really not. And I'd like to get your input on that. But perhaps we can schedule a time next week to have a proper conversation about that.
Can I say something further about drawdown and what might have looked like an adversarial attitude on my part really isn't? Because Paul Hawkins' book, Blessed Unrest, rocked my world. In 2007, I read Blessed Unrest side by side with Starhawk's Fifth Sacred Thing. And the two of those things together basically shaped what my activism has become today. I really appreciate Paul Hawkins. I really do. And I'm not opposed to doing those things. I'm just opposed to the goal of reversing climate change. The goal, I'm starting to really question the whole war mentality of fighting climate change. We're gonna fight near-term human extinction? I don't think so. Why should we? It's like fighting the Reaper himself. We're gonna fight the forces of evolution. Extinction is as necessary to evolution as death is to life. I really want to stand by that and say that extinction is not a bad thing. Death is not a bad thing. These are not dysfunctional. The human species has come to full fruition and flower, and we are at the peak. And we are very lucky, very blessed, if you will, to be alive at this time of peak rather than 400 years ago during the plague and struggle and all of that stuff. Now we're going into new plagues, but we won't go there. The point is, we are at the crest of cultural evolution. And there's no way in the world that I want to sustain that, because it comes at cost. I know Charles likes to talk about gig economy and more for me isn't necessarily less for you. But when it comes to resources, it's a finite planet. And more water use for us is less water available for other beings. For example, there is a finite amount of water on the planet. It is not a linear thing with inputs that we're going to be able to control and outputs that are going to go away wherever that is. Linda was bubbling with something.
Yeah.
I'm so bubbling. And so yet I say yes to more conversations because I think this is really what's required, what needs to happen in the world. And it is those of us who are these edge talkers really need to have these conversations, not to be right or wrong, not to necessarily even draw a conclusion. I've always said that I podcast not to provide answers. I actually provide more questions in the end. And that's very exciting to me that now there's more questions out in the world. Even in the soul's waiting room is the thought that this is an offering. This is an open hand offering. It's not the closed fist. You have to believe this. Hey, here's an idea. What do you believe? What are you thinking? And what really struck me, Susan, about what you said is, yes, there are choices we can make. I mean, there is feedback amplification involved in humanity and our relationship and balance with the planet, which I believe is a living, breathing being. We can't save humanity or save Earth for the sake of humanity. We need to find ourselves in a place where we want to protect and save Earth because Earth is so beautiful. Earth deserves saving. Earth, it is not for us. The byproduct of that is maybe we get to live on Earth a little bit longer and at this peak that we are experiencing. And I do agree with you that we are at the peak. We may have already started to become part of the descent, and that there is a legacy that we get to leave about humanity, whether it's about living on this planet and how long we get to live on this planet or just how long we get to live. It feels like it's all in the balance. And that's what I write about. That's what keeps me up in the middle of the night. That's why people tell me I need to get a life. And I say, that is my life. I'm sorry. This is my life because someone has to hold all of this. And I'm so grateful to see that, the faces that I can see here today in Zoom are also holding this, because it makes such a difference to me to know that there is a place in this world, to hold these things and not necessarily be the one who says, I'm going to go out and make calls about the carbon tax. It might not be my thing to do, but I do know what my thing is, and I'm going to do it until I take my last breath. And that's what I'm hearing from you, Susan. It's what I'm hearing from you, Todd, and what I heard from Sue Blythe. And that I'm just so excited about that I think these conversations can continue on any one of our podcasts or networks or be shared. So thank you. I'm in such gratitude right now. I can't even tell you for what I'm hearing so far today.
I am too. I'm actually kind of choked up, to be honest. I mean, it's so wonderful to find your tribe. I've been working alone for so long. And the idea of having potential collaborators is just warming my heart right here in this moment.
God, I am just so moved right now. I just can't even tell you both. I wish I had proper words to describe it, because I know people are going to be listening. And I'm just so moved with the two of you recognizing that we're where we're at, however you might describe that, but I think it's well described as at or past the peak of humanity. And we are trying to bring forth a new kind of consciousness, a new kind of appreciation and gratitude for the Mother Earth and the cosmos that gave us these beautiful lives that we have. Linda and Susan, I'm just so moved right now that we're here together doing this. I mean, this is beyond podcasting. This is just a great feeling to be with you both, and really, really appreciate where you're both coming from, and who knows where going, but just where you're coming from and where we're at right now. It's just beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you. I can't help but think that it's part of a larger story that we all get to be a part of. And I really am appreciative of that.
We're all in this together. All in this together. We are all in this together.
Well, I can tell you that conversation with Susan and Linda and myself brought us to some sort of edge, and I only hope that it had a similar effect on you. Next up is Linda Lombardo interviewing Becky Suzik. Becky has her own podcast, Joy Fuel, on joyfuel.org, and it's just a delightful talk. I've listened to it a few times and just get something new out of it every time. So without further ado, Linda Lombardo and Becky Suzik.
I'm Linda Lombardo. I'm here with Becky Suzik of Joy Fuel, and I want to say that really carefully, joyfuel.org. And in Todd's absence, we are recording for the Pachamama Alliance, for our pachacasters, and for Todd's program, which is called Edgetalkers. And I just love that name, that we're here on the edge, whatever that means, and talking about all compassion and sustainability and things that don't seem to be part of everyday conversation these days, I think. So welcome, Becky. It's really nice to have you here.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to sharing conversation.
Me too. So Joy Fuel, what a great play on words. Can you say a little bit more about you and what it is you do?
Sure. Well, Joy Fuel, I hope one day will be in the dictionary. And one of the meanings might be things that we do to intentionally activate our joy and the joy of others. Because I really believe that when we have our joy activated, we care about other people's joy. And I think the gateways to joy offer us opportunities for compassion, for connectedness, and for unity, and for all of the things that the regular media has us in opposition with each other. It's this other space of connectedness. So it's a story of the things that we do that connect us and support each other. Joy Fuel was born a few years ago as an e-course that I offered to whoever wanted to join, as it was a gift. And it was 44 days of embracing some gateways for joy and helping people to reactivate their joy. And as part of the e-course, I created the Kindcast, the Joy Fuel Kindcast, which was my play on using the word kindness instead of broadcasting or podcasting. Let's have some kindcasting. Let's cast some kindness around the world. And so I had fun. I love to play with words. I'm a logophile. So then created this very raw audio and video type of program that wasn't edited, that was just totally made of love. And I had to let go of expectations of having it, polished, but just to create it with what I had, because I didn't have financial resources to have good recording equipment or anything at that time. And we had over 200 people around the world that joined the Joy Fuel experience. And we talked about mindfulness, creativity, and kindness as the gateways. There are many gateways, but those were the particular ones that we studied, if you will, and we activated and we stoked in our lives for the 44 days. And in my work in person, I do creativity play shops, and historically I've been helping younger girls, like middle school age girls, to sustain their creativity in a world that's trying to make it competitive, but to nurture what I think is innate in all of us as human beings is creativity. But so many of us grow up and then we say, I'm not creative, because we've compared ourselves to other people instead of standing in our power and possibility of innovation in our own lives. And then for adults, I've helped people reclaim their creativity in these play shops. And over the last few years since the e-course, it became sort of a beckoning for me. I felt a responsibility outside of my immediate community here in Raleigh, North Carolina, to share the wisdom that I've been blessed to witness and feel, and cultivate it and create it in something that I can share online. And using social media, I like to say #media for good, because we need that. Of course, we need to hear the stories of the oppression and all of the atrocities that are going on in the world, and the world suffering and the world hurting. And we also need to hear the stories of the people who are not waiting for the whole world to change, but they're actually taking it upon themselves to be the change that they want to see in the world, as Gandhi said. And I feel that, well, I'm hoping that the Joy Fuel Kindcast will offer that space for people to share stories of things that they're doing for kindness, creativity, and joy around the world, youth and elder and middle, the whole breadth of humanity. So,
well, I love it. I just, more of that, please. That's all I can say. And I was particularly struck when you talked about school age girls and the idea of lost creativity or not being the artist. And I know that there is a story out in the world that's very well known, where every child in a preschool or a kindergarten class will raise their hands if you ask who's an artist in the room. And then as the children go up in their school years, less and less hands go up because they've been judged in some way, or whatever they've created has been seen as it's either not realistic, or it's been compared to a definition of art that there's an exclusivity about it rather than an inclusivity when it comes to art. And I think our creativity is tied to that, where once we believe we're not artists, we also believe we're not creative.
That's very true. It is. We have it squashed out of us, many of us. Instead of what happens if we look at creative expression, whether it's writing poetry or painting or just playing with different medium, what would happen if we looked at those as opportunities for play as adults? Like, what would happen if we adults played, and instead of having aspirations of creating something that you, Linda, might like. If I paint this, I'm hoping Linda will like this. Well, you may not like this, but what about the act of creating it? Why could that not be enough if I enjoyed it? And even myself, I might make something and I could be really critical of it, but why can I not just make it for the sake of making it? Why do I have to like it? We have this culture that says you have to make something meaningful. And I just don't think that when we look at ourselves as expressive, creative human beings, we need to feel empowered such that for the solutions that the world needs, we need to be risking, we need to be trying, we need to be, if we can, play through to solutions. It would be wonderful to do that. But I feel like this is just like a beginning for many adults when we come back to that space of play. And I do wonder that too. What would happen if the solutions that we need are not as difficult as we think they are, like how hard we have to work to fix the world? What happens if it's really not that hard? What happens if it's as simple as being joyful and playful and compassionate? Because to me, in my community, I've seen that when I hold that energy, people around me have more joy, and then they don't tolerate other people's joylessness, and it's infectious, and it's simple. And it's also hard because for me, sometimes when I'm talking about joy, people look at me like, what do you have to be joyful about? You're not reading the news, you don't know. I'm like, no, you know what? Life hurts. There is suffering in life. And I'm not saying ignore all of that. I'm saying yes, but make time for intentional joy. And I'm hoping that as people discover my program, that if it resonates with them, that it will become like a pattern of behavior when they listen to the program, that they're intentionally thinking about their joy and what are they doing to cultivate their own joy, because it starts with each one of us.
What I love about that is you brought up so many things that resonate and could be that we could talk about for hours. The idea, though, that we must be complicit in this story about the pain and the suffering of the world, to the extent that there is joylessness in our life or joylessness in our story, and that our hearts can't hold joy and sorrow simultaneously. There are people who do get angry about someone who is expressing joy, expressing that grounded optimism that Lynn Twist talks about. And you must feel, it must feel bleak, it must feel hopeless. I'm carrying around all this sorrow. I couldn't possibly carry around joy at the same time. And so your work is a change in that story. You're adding, offering a chapter in that story that says, yes, we can hold joy and sorrow at the same time. And perhaps in joy, there is a solution to so much of what we're experiencing these days. I want to get into Pachamama Alliance a little bit here too, and what brought you to Pachamama Alliance.
Yes, well, a few years ago, I was blessed to read Lynn's The Soul of Money book. I've done a lot of work in gift economy and gift ecology, and tried to find a way to run my business that is not prioritizing money. So I was grateful to come across Lynn's work a few years back, and her work really just spoke to my heart and gave me so many ideas of things that I could play with my own relationship with money. And then after that connection, I discovered the Pachamama Alliance, and about nearly 2 years ago, was part of one of the earlier Game Changers circles, and had a really wonderful experience with the deeper dive of studying the different curriculum, the different pieces of videos and the readings and things, and really asking myself, where is my piece of healing? What is it? Where am I supposed to contribute the gifts that I might have, if I'm so bold to say that I mean, I believe we all have gifts, but I also don't know if we know what our gifts are until we die. I think we have feelings of what they might be, but there are so many more than what we recognize our gifts to be. There are so many more things than we can even imagine them to be, but we can work towards what we think they are. So I was holding that question. I knew that joy was a big love point for me. I knew that creativity is, and I knew that kindness is, because I was part of the Sacred Kindness Circle. And just holding that question during Game Changers, every person that comes to Game Changers, they may not even have their question in the beginning, but it's a really wonderful opportunity to sit with the pain of the world as we're studying what's going on with Mama Earth, and sit with, where is my little thread that I'm supposed to pick up? Am I holding the right thread? Is there another thread that I have time and energy to hold to? And then to explore that in a small group. It was really a wonderful experience.
The idea of the thread, it was very powerful for me. It took me to this image of, everyone holding a piece of this thread, long thread, creating some kind of design, the web of life, or, whatever you want to call it. And the idea that we all have gifts, and curious about maybe not knowing what the gifts are until until after we're dead. And that's because that strikes something for me and what I do with the radio podcasts of In the Soul's Waiting Room. And what does it mean? What does everything mean, basically? And I think it was described to me once, the thing that we cannot not do, the thing that we bring to us, we bring to the world in every way, is the thing that we are meant to do. And for you, that might be joy, being joy fueled, and it's hard for us to know. If we gravitate to what brings us joy in the world, whether it's through our own personal pain or through the sorrow that we see in the world, that's the gift, that's the thing. And you can't question it to the point that it becomes so narrow that you think it's an it. Yeah. Our life purpose or our gift is not an it. It's an energy we bring everywhere. And you and I have some very similar experiences with Pachamama, the Soul of Money, and Lynn Twist, and the idea of wanting to know more about the world. So the idea of Joy Fuel and where it might be going next, and this two-part question, which I always say I'm never going to ask a guest on the radio, and I always do. So as a pachacaster, how do you see your gift, your role in this, expanding to be part of what we're doing here with and for Pachamama?
Well, I think there's so many oases, and I would love Joy Fuel to be one of the oases. I think there are a lot of them, but I don't think we can find them very easily because we risk exhaustion from the suffering of the earth because it does hurt so much. And it's really important that we particularly do something for our own joy, whether it's listening to Joy Fuel, whether it's listening to some of the ideas of using kindness and creativity as gateways, whatever it is that brings us joy, that we need to become more aware of our personal joy hygiene, the way we brush our teeth and we brush our hair every day. Why are we not looking in the mirror and asking ourselves, how is our joy?
Oh, isn't that interesting?
We're so vain, but what about joy? Because without joy, who cares if our hair's a mess, really? So I think my intention for the Joy Fuel Kindcast, whether people listen regularly or they listen once, is to spark that notion in each of us that we are each worthy of having joy on a regular basis, even if we're going through hell in our lives, which a lot of people are. As we're waking up to the pain of the earth and the pain of the oppression and the pain of all of the things that we as human beings are doing to each other, but also to wake up to the joy of the things that as human beings we're doing to heal Mama Earth and to heal each other. There are so many stories of kindness, and we need to hear that. We need those oases. And I hope that my program, offers that long, cool drink of water. And also, I let go of the outcome for the program. As hard as that is to do, to take it so seriously as I do, I went to school many years ago for broadcast journalism, and I've been a journalist and a marketer for over 20 years. And now I've relearned broadcasting in terms of the editing, and there's all a new world to me. You can do so many more things with sound engineering. It's amazing. But because it's just me at this point with Joy Fuel, I do wear all of the hats. And I would love to employ people whose gift is sound engineering. I'm pretending I'm working as hard as I can to be good at that. But I would love to be a force of media good that supports people in their things that bring them joy in their profession. And so that I can spend more time bringing people's stories to light than that is taking me to do all of the processing and everything, that the back end stuff, which I'm enjoying. But the only way that will happen is if I find a way to make this financially sustainable. And I'm experimenting with a couple of different things because I do everything that I do in gift economy. When I do play shops and things, I don't charge people outright. I have suggested gifting, and I never turn anyone away if they don't have financial funds to contribute, because I believe that human beings are the ultimate currency. We are the ones that invented financial currency, and so I choose to prioritize human beings as the ultimate currency. And in that same spirit, I'm hoping that the human beings that get a drink of water from the program will be able to help sustain it, because I don't want it to become a corporate thing. I don't want it to become necessarily, unless there's a way for it to be done for good. I'm open to that. I have to let go. I have to have some ideas, push in that direction, and then let go of how it unfolds. But I prefer not to have outright advertising because I think it dilutes the intention. In a world where now the marketing engine is always telling us that we're not enough, we're not creative enough, we're not beautiful enough, all of these messages of inadequacy and insufficiency and lack, which I don't believe, unless I can do advertising that promotes wisdom and comes from a place of wholeness. I call it yin marketing. If there's a way, that's what I do in my own business, is I offer gently and I let go. I never say, oh, there's only 2 places left, 2 places remaining. You better get one if you want one. It's you know. I say, if there's a space for you, it's here, have it. And it's a different way of being. And so I'm exploring, how do I create a radio program? How do I have a program that's available online? How do I have it available for radio stations as well as a gift? And then also express what my needs are as an individual, as a mother who's raising 3 children, all these things, and keep it sustainable. I don't know what the answer is, so I'm open to people's suggestions. But
you're certainly in the mystery of it, and it seems as if you have the wording that's really an arrow to the heart, that's really resonant in so many ways. I love the gifting, that if there's a spot for you, it's here. All of that, and I think that's a whole separate conversation. Have onion marketing. I feel very much the same way, and at the same time have to pay my bills, and so I think that's a very powerful conversation that we can have even at another time to express that. Our Todd and my list is getting longer and longer as we talk to more and more people about all these exciting things that are going on. And Becky, before we close, how can people find your site? How can they find you? Give us some maps into that journey, if you would.
Sure. Well, I'd love people to check out the Joy Fuel website, which is joyfuel, JOYFUEL.org. And on the site, they'll find the first few episodes so far. And the programs come out about every 2 weeks. I'm getting religious about it. I'm coming up to, I'm working really hard. I'm on each show being 2 weeks apart. And they are also in different podcast directories. I'm working slowly and steady to get those seeded out there on Google Play, iTunes, and Stitcher, just to name a few of the big ones. But it's slow and steady because it is just me. I'm not only learning about the editing, but then I, as a marketer, I'm like, oh my goodness, I haven't even sent out a press release yet. I mean, there's so many things that need to be done, or that can be done in service. So I'm creating the message. I'm creating these incredible interviews with these people. They're the ones that are the incredible storytellers, and being able to share those stories with people. Now I feel a tremendous responsibility to bring listeners to the program to hear these amazing stories of kindness.
Well, you're a pretty amazing story yourself. Thank you, Becky Suzik. Joy Fuel. Love it.
Thank you so much, Linda.
We are all in this together. All in this together. We're all in this together. All in this together. All in this. All in this together. All in this. Yeah, we're all in this Here we're all in this, the rhythm of